Borders don't just close, they tighten, slowly, quietly, and then faster than anyone expected. And here's the part nobody tells you. By the time it makes the news, the supply chain already knew about it 2 weeks ago. Prices moved, shelves thinned, delivery windows slipped. Nobody made an announcement, it just happened. The people who got caught off guard weren't uninformed, they were just slow. Almost everything you use daily has crossed at least one international border to reach you. Your food, your medication, your fuel. It all moves through trade corridors that run on one basic agreement between countries: keep the lanes open. When that agreement strains, sanctions, political fallout, military posturing, economic retaliation, those lanes slow. And when the lanes slow, everything sitting behind them slows too. Most people see the news, feel a vague sense of unease, maybe glance at the pantry, nod thoughtfully, and then order takeout. This video is for the ones who'd rather not do that. But before we get into it, if this kind of content is useful to you, hit subscribe. No doomsday theatrics here, no panic selling bunker gear, just practical, grounded prep for scenarios that are actually happening around you or most likely to happen, with a new video every week. We'll be covering 5 supplies you need in place before the crunch hits. Not complicated, not a massive investment, just timely. Let's get into it. Number 1 on the list, and honestly the one that moves fastest, is fuel. When borders tighten, energy shipments are among the very first things to face delays, rerouting, or outright restriction. Countries use fuel as leverage. It's one of the fastest pressure points to activate when relations deteriorate. On the ground, it looks like this. A tank that cost you $40 last month now costs $60, then $70. And it doesn't wait for you to budget for it. It just moves and you adjust, or you don't. If you commute, run a small business, or need to move quickly in an emergency, that math hits hard like a crack. Distance collapses when fuel is unpredictable. You stop taking trips you don't have to take. You start calculating things you never used to think about. Congratulations, you're officially broke. Your vehicle is only as useful as the fuel in it. An empty tank in a crisis isn't a minor inconvenience, it's a trap. The habit to build: keep your tank above half. Not full every single day, just never below the halfway mark. If you can legally and safely store a small fuel reserve, a proper fuel can with a stabilizer added, that's real buffer time without crossing into anything extreme. Think of it as giving yourself a head start. Not hoarding, not panicking, just not being the last person in line at a pump that's running dry. Fuel locks down your mobility, but what happens when the shelves that were supposed to feed you start locking down too? That's number 2. Non-perishable food, and the pattern here is almost predictable at this point. Every time a supply disruption hits, the same thing plays out almost without fail. Imported goods disappear from shelves first. Specialty items, cooking oil, certain grains, canned goods from overseas, gone within days. Then the panic buying starts, and suddenly the domestic staples vanish too. Not because the supply actually ran out, because everyone panicked at the same time and the shelves couldn't keep up with the spike. People clear a store in 48 hours over products they weren't even thinking about the week before. You've seen it. You probably lived it at least once in the last few years. Don't be the person doing the clearing. Be the person who already has enough and genuinely doesn't need to go anywhere. Your foundation doesn't need to be elaborate. Rice, dried beans and lentils, oats, canned protein, tuna, sardines, chicken, peanut butter, honey, salt. Boring list, right? Good. Boring means cheap, shelf-stable for years, and available right now before prices reflect what's coming. You don't need a bunker. You need a calm, consistent rotation. A little extra each time you shop stored in a cool, dry spot. 2 to 4 weeks of food for your household completely changes your options when things get tight. It's not about expecting the end of the world. It's about not being completely dependent on a supply chain that's currently having a difficult time. That's a reasonable position to be in, more reasonable than the alternative. Having enough food to last you weeks will give you enough time to adjust to the situation, but time means nothing if you can't actually transact, and that brings us to something most people overlook completely until it's too late. And that's where physical cash comes in, because when digital systems lag, paper is the only thing that still works. Here's why. Digital payments are incredible, right up until they aren't. Under real stress, systems lag, card terminals go down, payment processors freeze, banks apply transaction restrictions, either proactively or under government direction. This isn't hypothetical. It has happened in actual geopolitical events in recent years, in countries that also thought it wouldn't happen to them. Cash doesn't need a server. It doesn't need a functioning card reader, a stable internet connection, or permission from a financial institution that's currently having a very complicated week. You don't need to pull out your life savings. You need enough to run your household for 1 to 2 weeks if digital systems go unreliable. Think about what that number actually looks like for you. Groceries, fuel, maybe a few essentials. It's probably less than you think. Small denominations matter more than people realize. 20s, 10s, 5s. A $100 bill during a disruption is nearly useless if the person you're buying from can't make change, and during a disruption, a lot of people can't. Keep it somewhere secure and deliberate, not your wallet, not the bottom of a junk drawer, somewhere you'd actually go to if things got messy. And if you're the type who thinks carrying physical cash is old-fashioned, that's fine. You've clearly been lucky so far. Luck, though, is not a preparedness strategy. Now we're getting into the ones that carry real personal risk if you ignore them. Number 4 is medication and health supplies, and this one is not a drill. This is the one people underestimate most, also the one that becomes critical the fastest. A huge portion of global pharmaceutical manufacturing runs through a very small number of countries. When those supply pipelines strain, and they strain faster than you'd expect, availability tightens with very little warning and almost no visible lead-up. For anyone managing a chronic condition, high blood pressure, diabetes, thyroid issues, mental health, a 2-week gap in medication isn't just inconvenient, it's a medical event. The kind that lands people in emergency rooms during the exact moment emergency rooms are already overwhelmed. You cannot improvise your way around a prescription shortage. That's not a scare tactic, it's just how the body works. If you're on regular medication, have an honest conversation with your doctor about maintaining a slightly extended supply. Most practitioners will accommodate this as a reasonable request, especially right now. It's not paranoid, it's practical. Beyond prescriptions, build a basic home health kit. Pain relievers, fever reducers, antihistamines, antiseptic, bandages, electrolyte packets. These are the items that become weirdly difficult to find the moment a lot of people start needing them at once. Think through what your household actually goes through in a month, then have more of it than you think you'll need. Medical supply chains were already shown to be fragile a few years ago. That fragility didn't get resolved, it just became background noise. And that's exactly the problem, because when the signal finally gets loud, you need to be able to hear it. That's number 5. Communication and power backup, because staying informed isn't a comfort. In a disruption, it's a survival tool. When systems get stressed, information is one of the first things to become unreliable. News coverage slows or gets inconsistent. In some scenarios, it's deliberately filtered. And if power infrastructure becomes unstable, your access to any of it can disappear mid-update. Your phone is your primary lifeline until the battery dies, your carrier goes down, or internet access gets throttled or restricted. Any one of those can happen before you see it coming. All 3 at once isn't impossible. A fully charged power bank is one of the cheapest, most practical things you can own. It keeps your communication window open when the grid decides not to cooperate. A hand crank or solar-powered emergency radio gives you access to broadcast signals that don't depend on internet infrastructure at all. Local emergency alerts, weather warnings, official updates. These travel on frequencies that function even when everything else is struggling. It's not glamorous, it works. Go one step further, make sure the people in your household have a clear plan for how to reach each other if cell networks are jammed or overloaded. A meeting point, a backup contact, something written down and agreed on before it becomes necessary to use it. Simple plans survive chaos better than complicated ones. Low-tech often functions when high-tech fails. That's not a coincidence. That's exactly why it's still worth having. Here's what it comes down to. Crises don't begin when borders close. They begin when supply chains tighten, and that happens quieter, earlier, and more gradually than most people ever notice. By the time it's obvious to everyone, the calm window for affordable, unhurried preparation has already passed. What's left is expensive, reactive, and stressful, and you're competing for resources with everyone else who also waited. The world gives signals before it gives consequences. Most people ignore them because the signals are quiet, boring, and never feel urgent enough to act on. Until they do. Now, quick question. If borders started tightening this week, what's the one thing you genuinely struggle to get your hands on? Not hypothetically, your actual situation. Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and the answers are always different depending on where you are in the world. If this gave you something useful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of what's coming.